Welcome to Soo Sports TV. I'm Tony Bonifero, joined alongside Soo Greyhound General Manager Kyle Raftis. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Thanks for having me on.
So I know last season was a bit of a rebuild, and this year the Greyhounds have been one of the best teams in the OHL, right? Obviously, you had a vision of what this team could be. Has this team surpassed your expectations so far this season?
I don't think I'd say that. I think when we are kind of going through our summer planning and getting the group together, I think it surpassed us in probably how fast we came out of the gate. I know we've always been a team that pride ourselves on that, but no, I don't think expectation wise, I think we're right where we need to be, and obviously we have a few more steps to take here in the second half. But no, I definitely don't think it's surpassed it by any means.
So last year, I mean, there was a lot of knock. One of the things that the Memorial Cup committee kind of said was, they didn't know if this team could be competitive, right? This year, that was one of the reasons why they said that they gave the cup to Saginaw. Was that a little extra motivation for you guys this year to kind of say, hey, you know what, we know what we're doing here, and we can have a quick turnaround?
Yeah, truthfully, we didn't get that feedback. We've kind of just surmised that was probably what they were thinking, because when you go facility, city-wise, organization, I don't think anything could be held against us. So truthfully, we weren't told it was to do with the on-ice production. So we kind of just assumed that was probably what they were thinking. I definitely think there was a lot of players in that room that kind of had a chip on their shoulder. I think you've heard a lot of interviews with guys talking about it, and that's not something we like. As soon as that decision was made, we tried to do as little talking about it truthfully as it mattered, because it just goes back into being at that regular year. If you got to get through the front door and you're going to do it that way. So I felt like it was talked about so much last year that we just wanted to put it behind us. But yeah, truthfully, we weren't told that. But at the same time, we just assumed that there's no knock on the facility, there's no knock on the city, there's no knock on the fan base. Like there's no other reason why that we didn't deserve to have that. So we used that as probably some motivation in terms of getting our summer together, but it didn't change any of our plans. Obviously, going through, our regular draft, import draft, and then obviously into training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys had a very active trade deadline. You were out there making some moves. You brought in some real high-end talent. At what point in the season did you realize, hey, you know what? We might be buyers this year, and we're going to make a run at this?
Yeah, I think just seeing how that team was gelling together, and I'm not a big believer in you have to kind of go in September and this is 100% you're going to be your plan. You have to be flexible, but I also don't believe that you should be flip-flopping when you get into that late November, December time, once you got to have a plan in place. And yeah, the deadline this year was probably, of my kind of 9 years going through, probably the wildest, because there were some teams that weren't sure if they were going to move some players out, what their plan was. And I think that goes back to, how close it is in the Eastern Conference in terms of, I had one Eastern Conference general manager tell me, like, if his goalie has a good weekend, they could be in first place. And if, they have a tough weekend, they could be battling for seventh. So it's so tight on that side. And I think throughout the league, and the unfortunate part was there's so many coaching changes early that I think a lot of teams were kind of waiting as long as they could to kind of get an idea of what they truly had. And so it was a little tough to maneuver on that side of it. But yeah, I think right around that time of, we try and look at that, American Thanksgiving as a good parameter of what your team looks like. You're going to have your injuries, you have suspension, different things are going to be like that, but you kind of see how your young players are trending, how your older guys have kind of taken a step once you get through that, second part of the season. We always talk about how you get outside of training camp and then the season starts, and then it really takes a step as all those NHL players from camp start to return, and you really kind of see what you have truthfully.
So you brought in a real high-end player in Hayes. And obviously, you knew there'd be a little bit of a cost associated with that. There could be an argument that, Kostoff and Clattenburg were two of the better players after the Christmas break. So was it tough giving up two guys that play such a high energy and aggressive style for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's tough whenever you're moving any good young player out of your lineup, and especially they're great people off the ice. And we always try and pride ourselves on having that nucleus of a team of gone to development camps together, been drafted by the team, developed by the team. And I give both those players a ton of credit, because I think if you look at the end of last season, if you looked at those two players and thought this was going to bring in a world junior star, a guy coming off 40 goals, one of the most dangerous players in the league. People probably would have laughed at it, and it wasn't a case of a lopsided deal. These are two really good players that played themselves in that spot, and I give them a ton of credit, as well as the staff, for them kind of putting them in the situation where I don't think that deal happens without them being included. And yeah, it's tough when you have to give up good players, but that's kind of the price you have to pay.
So when it comes to the deadline, this is just from a fan standpoint. So I'm hoping you give us a little behind the scenes look at a couple of things, if you don't mind. So generally, when it comes to deals, do you identify the players you'd like, and then do you initiate the conversation, or do teams basically kind of let it know about who's available, and if you're kind of interested in them, you call them and kind of start the conversation?
Yeah, it's kind of case by case, truthfully, but it's a lot of times kind of inquiring on, like, I try and not just wait and just think, oh, who might be available, because you're never sure what teams are thinking. I know previously, before I was even in this role, you could look at two teams and think, hey, this team's got, a surplus of defensemen, and this team's got a surplus of forwards. Like, wouldn't it make sense to make a trade? And now you're in that seat, and you could have that same situation. You make that call, and the other team's like, nope, not interested. And it's funny as an outsider, because you're never sure how each team values their players internally, what their end goals are. I think it's super competitive in our league. There's not a lot of situations where guys are helping each other out to improve. Everyone's so worried about their own team and getting the best out of it, and they have their own goals, whether it's just get in the playoffs, just get some stability in the organization, whatever it might be. So it's always tough to kind of maneuver on that side of it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of days that go by with a lot of phone calls and not a ton accomplished, truthfully. But it's more so about just getting an idea of what the potentials, players that might be available if that case comes. And sometimes they come together really quick, and sometimes it can be a real kind of slow process on that side of it. But yeah, usually it starts with kind of just, what are they thinking? Is this a fit? Is there anybody on our side of it that might make this work? And it kind of goes from there. And I'd say 99% of the time it goes nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So I assume it's different for each trade that you make, right? And you don't need to give specifics, but how long does a deal generally take together? Like, is the minutes, hours, days, months? What's like the quickest deal you've ever pulled off without getting into specifics? And what's generally has there been one that's taken a little bit longer to pull off?
Yeah, I'd say a majority of them take a few weeks for sure. I think sometimes you can think it's not going anywhere one day, something can change the next day. Some general managers are a little bit quicker in terms of their decision making, and some have, I find it funny. A lot of times there's a lot of owners get involved, and sometimes a general manager might be on paper, but not necessarily the one making decisions for the hockey team when it comes down to it. So there's sometimes can be a lot of different factors, a lot of different people become involved. And whenever you have that many stakeholders, it can really kind of, sideline a process, and also kind of, slow down one. And some people really like to go think, but I think my first year when we had, there was a couple deals we did, and it was like, I think it was D'Angelo, the Richie Bolin deal, and Bailey. And it was something that, like, it looked like it all happened within, I want to say, like 40 hours. Meanwhile, like those things took like a month to kind of get to that point. And it just looked like it was just, we were just going crazy on that day. But usually there's a lot of conversation and things that have to go in play. And truthfully, the way the league's set up now, like, I'd say majority of players have no trade clauses that have to be discussed. The parents have to sign off on it. Agents are involved. So that's why, unfortunately, sometimes you see these things get leaked out a little quicker, but it's also not a case where you're just kind of pulling a player into the office and saying, hey, this is where you're headed to, or this is or vice versa. So yeah, I think these things can take a little bit of time, and you like to be methodical when you're going through it, because these aren't easy decisions to make on both ends.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you've addressed this before, but what do you say to people who, get kind of concerned by the number of draft picks that get dealt out, and, worried about those types of things? I know I think you guys still have 15 or 16 picks in next year's draft,
Yeah.
and things like that. But, we often see, tons of draft picks going back and forth, not just with the Greyhounds, but with other teams too, right? That's the nature of doing business. So what do you say to people who are, concerned about that?
Well, I think, yeah, like, there's always a chance where a lot of people you can recruit picks, different things like that. I think with us, it was important for this trade deadline that, we have our 16 picks going in the draft. I don't think I've ever had 16 picks, truthfully. And it's a situation where you have to understand that draft year, where you're going with it. And the ones down the road, I think, are a little bit easier to recruit. But I think it was key for us to kind of make sure that we had these picks coming up for this 2008 born draft, because I think we had a really strong 2007 draft. And I think it's a situation where if you can kind of move out picks instead of moving out that good young player, I think you have to look at it. But every case is different. And I think some people get, wrapped up because they see the amount of them, but they're not exactly sure. They could be spread out over a couple of years. They're not necessarily all in one draft. And, it's funny because there's some groups that, of people that get upset about, the draft picks you're moving, but at the same time, they're the same group that didn't think it was a strong draft year. So why are you holding on to them? So it's kind of always that hem and haw. And obviously you like when you're going into a draft, have as many, shots at it as you can. And I think we have that for this April. And I think obviously down the line, we'll have to address that when we can, but it's something that, when we're in a situation we're in, these are good problems to have, and definitely wanted to improve the team. So we didn't want to kind of sit tight.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the coaching staff this year, because obviously a big change this year was bringing in Tyler Ertl as an assistant coach. By all accounts, it's been a great hire so far for you guys. Just kind of talk about what he brings to the table for this team and kind of what led to him being hired.
Yeah, I think with Tyler, he's obviously been around the game for a long time. His father was a coach and general manager, worked through the OHL, and he was a great player himself. And I think as he was kind of getting to a spot in his teaching career that he was looking at making a move, it was something that, we started the conversation at that point. And I think where he's come in and done a great job for us is, X's and O's, I think we're right up there against a lot of guys. But at the same time, I think with any athlete, it's not just about, what do you know, but it's, how do you teach that is that next question. And how do you kind of bring that about? How do you get everybody pulling the same direction? And I think so much now, any of our meetings, whether it's myself, any of the coaching staff, there's usually more than a couple of us involved with it. And it's very group attack on that side of it. And I think Tyler's done a great job of coming in and bringing that positivity with that experience and just able to kind of communicate those things through her. Because I think sometimes a head coach comes in, addresses the group, he has his one-to-one meetings, but at the same time, those next layer of meetings come through, whether it's a D coach working with the D, the forward coach working with the forward. And a lot of players kind of need that one-on-one attention. And it's just the way they kind of, this age group learns now. And I think how it's always going to be moving forward. And I think Tyler's done a great job kind of on that one-on-one side with a lot of players. And I think that's why you see such a tight-knit group, because they all feel like they're a big part of it.
When it comes to Coach Dean, and this is, again, a little bit behind the scenes things, when it comes to moving players at the deadline and those types of things, does he provide ideas, suggestions for kind of what he wants to do or what he's expecting? Or is it totally separate? Is he just coaching the guys that you're, giving to him? How do you guys, what's your working relationship like in terms of that?
No, we're definitely, I put all the coaches involved in, our scouts, everyone's, you like to hear everybody's opinion, because sometimes I think you can watch a game and it's funny. You see something differently, or maybe there's some style of player that you're just really frustrated with, or they're just having a bad 2 weeks. And I think it's just good to get everyone's sense of, where players are at today, where they're trending to. And I think when we chatted more so about the deadline, it wasn't necessarily about specifics. It was more so, this is what I think the team needs. And we try and talk about areas of focus. And then from there, kind of build out our list of, targets that, might be available. Who can we get? And, obviously, they're always top end players when you hear people kind of chat about it, but sometimes it's about who would be a really good fit here. And I think we've done a good job over the last couple of years having really good people. And I think it becomes that much easier to work with. And I think our focus has been, bringing in those high character people with good motors. Obviously the on ice hockey stands for itself, but at the same time, you want guys that can learn from us and could benefit from that change, and not just players that are, hey, they're a good player there and they might be okay here. We want guys that can come in and really elevate us. So I think whenever we're dealing with the coaching staff, we try and, you want to talk about specifics, but at the same time, it's more so that areas of like, if we could get a little help here or whatever it might be, and then we kind of try and reverse engineer that from that.
And that's great. And also talk about the job he's done this year. I mean, we've seen a massive progression, right, from last year in terms of a lot of individual players as well. Just talk about, the job that he's done and kind of how he's progressed as a coach here for the Soo Greyhounds over the years.
Yeah, it's always funny when you're in a great market like the Soo. I think a lot of attention always gets focused on certain areas, and the coach being one. And I think as I said to you before, I think probably where we did a poor job is not kind of explaining to maybe everybody what the situation was going to be when you put a bid in for the Memorial Cup. And I think we were going to be not as aggressive as we've been in, for sure my previous 8 years on going into last year of, we've always tried to be aggressive, improving the team, making those steps. And I think, everybody kind of decided that, there was going to be certain areas we were going to blame. And I think there's, obviously other factors that went involved with this, some injuries. And again, we didn't want to, move those assets, draft picks just to patch things. We were like dedicated of this is what we're going to do. We're going to play these young guys and they're going to take a step. And I think certain guys, when they're at the top, probably get too much credit. And then when they're, at the bottom, get too much blame. So I think there's always a middle part. And I know with John, it's not like he just remembered how to coach over the summer, or he just decided he was going to put a summer work into it. He's obsessed with the game, obsessed with this team. And, he really kind of took it on the chin last year, I think, in a lot of ways from a lot of blame standard. And we tried to protect that as much as we could. But at the same time, I always had full belief in him. And I think he's done a great job kind of putting that year behind us and really kind of taking that step. And I think you see that players, how engaged they are with them and how much they believe in him. And I think that when we talk about players, it's, those thirds of, we have to find players that are going to fit with us. They got to put the work in, and then we got to develop them too. And those are kind of those areas that we always look at into it. And I think we've done a good job with that. And I think a lot of players seeing that confidence from their staff really helps their game. And I think that's where you see a lot of guys take steps that are probably even quicker than what a lot of people could imagine.
So I'm not sure how much you pay attention to the message boards and and all that jazz with Soo Greyhound fans and kind of what the talk is, but goaltending has been kind of a hot button issue for amongst fans all season long. Sure. Schenkel's really come along and progressed throughout this season, and the improvements he's made over the last couple of months have just been unbelievable, right? And it's pretty evident the work that they're putting in. Miller, he's a young goalie. He's had a bit of an up and down season as well. Did you consider possibly adding a veteran goaltender at the deadline?
No, I think if you go back to even stories on our website coming out of training camp, I think we were extremely happy with where Charlie was at. I think, truthfully, if his injury doesn't happen last year, I think they underestimate how good a year he was having with us last year. And I think he was a little bit forgotten because as he came back after his injury, he probably didn't get back up to where he wanted to be. And I think when you look at, Miller, I think he's been fantastic, right, in the last probably month to 6 weeks. And I think he's really taken a step. He's skyrocketing up NHL draft boards, and he's somebody that kind of, they take time to get to where they're going to be. And I think with that goaltending coach change in the summer probably didn't kind of do anyone any benefit. Obviously, Matt Smith getting an NHL job with Chicago is not something anyone would hold it back. But at the same time, I find that coaching spot is so tight knit that, you don't want to say it's a process to get it, but it just takes a little bit of time. And I think, we were even teasing Mark Vicentine the other day. Every time Schenkel's shining, he gives him a shout out, and I feel like he must be on the take there. But they're such a tight knit group, those three of those guys, and I think they've really covered up a lot of things for us, even in this last month when we had a lot of players out, whether it's injuries, World Juniors, whatever it might be. Our goaltending was really at the top of it, and I think we've always had that belief, and I'm glad to see them both kind of getting their credit where it's been deserved. And I think when we were looking at in terms of ads. If you maybe in September, we were probably people were calling about it. There was more conversation, but I don't think there was much, if any, conversation in the last 2 months about that. I think everyone knew as an outsider just where we were at in terms of our goaltending was set, and the guys were taking steps. And I still think both have some more leaps and bounds they can get to here in the second half.
That's great. Got a few more questions here, and then we'll get into a fun little game that I want to play with you here. So you were hired back in 2014, obviously, and you've had an extremely successful stint here in the Soo. And you've seen quite a few coaches that you've hired get shots at the next level. You've seen quite a few players move on to the next level, and you've seen them all develop. And it's only a matter of time before you get your opportunity to kind of move up and move on, we feel like anyway. Obviously, you're committed to the Greyhounds for the future, but what kind of long-term goals do you have for yourself professionally?
Yeah, obviously, I think I've always been in the belief that I'd love to work in the NHL at one point. I think for me, the roles, the more you learn about the business, the more you learn that I don't think it's just taking a job just to take a job. I think you want to work with really good people. I'm really fortunate that I get that opportunity here in the Soo. And I think if the right opportunity comes with, the right organization and the right role, I think you definitely have to look at it. And yeah, to your point, I think I've worked with 3 head coaches. 2 of them are right now running an NHL bench, which is pretty cool. And countless amount of scouts and players and equipment managers. It's been, it's looked like a lot of turnover, and we take a lot of pride in terms of developing not just the on ice players, but the staff around it too. And I think that's why it's such an intriguing place to come and work, and you kind of get that new energy that comes into the building. But yeah, I think for long term, it would be a great opportunity. But I think it's not just take a job just to say you're working in pro hockey. I don't think that's necessarily the fit or what I'm looking at. And I've had some kind of cool conversations over the past couple of years, and some things that kind of you always think about, or your head hits a pillow at night, you think, oh, maybe that'd be a cool opportunity, and it just wasn't the right fit at the right time. But I love working in the Soo, and I got a great group around me right now. So yeah, if something comes down the road, we'll have to look at it. But right now, it's all about the red and white.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that you deserve a ton of credit for, that I think a lot of people often, a lot of people forget about, right? Is just the success that people that you have hired, moving on to the next level, right? And that's a testament to the job you're doing here. And that's amazing. And I think you deserve a lot of credit for that as well. And the Soo can be a real tough place to play. So how do you sell the Soo to families, right? People from Southern Ontario just think the Soo's a little place up north, and it could, it used to be a big issue trying to get people to come up here and play.
Sure.
What's your selling point to families?
Well, it's funny. Even when I got hired, it was kind of a situation where I think they had won 1 playoff series in 6 years. They'd missed the playoffs for it, and it's we probably don't do a good enough job in the Soo talking about this, about the standard and what we have now, because the down season for us is a lot of teams would take that in a heartbeat, and obviously we want to get to that final banner, and that's something we're still chasing, and that's kind of our obsession right now. But it's funny when you go outside of the Soo. The reputation, even how much has it taken a jump over the last, and I give full credit to, right from ownership right down to our former players, because everybody that comes up there gets treated so well, and is put in a spot to develop and see their dreams. And I think you put on an NHL game now, and there's always a Soo connection you can talk about. And we joke it follows players, because even just adding a couple guys recently, they were laughing because they're like, we're getting texts from guys that played here like 3 years ago. Welcome to the Soo. And we call it more so of a family. Some kind of now say it's a little bit of a cult, but there's an obsession with everybody that they believe they're part of something. And then it's funny. My first couple of years, there was, the recruitment, it's never easy. It's not, you're always going to be, the distance is going to be there, but that distance does not come up at all anymore when you're talking about everyone's very aware of what we're doing. And obviously there's always that talk about, what type of fit it's going to be for that family and their player. But at the same time, it's about what we do, development of players and the treatment. And I think you try and talk about, doing the right thing is easy to say, when you're kind of sitting in the living room talking to somebody, but it's tough to do day to day. And I find the benefit we have is all these players talk to each other now. It's a very tight knit group. They play spring hockey growing up, and, nobody lies. Everyone tells the truth about what their experience is like. And we're lucky that we've had a lot of guys that have had a great experience. And I think that's really the end of the day recruitment, because as I said earlier on, the facility is unbelievable. It's a passionate fan base. You come up here and they embrace you fully. They want to see effort out of you, but they embrace anyone that comes up. And I find it's more so in the fan base that they think, oh, is this player not going to report, or are they worried about it? I think there's some stuff there that's maybe lingering from years ago, but I can assure them that that's not the case anymore. And obviously it's never going to be as easy because you're right next door to where the bulk of the players are coming from. But at the same time, I think when you kind of work at it and make sure you're on top of things, that, it becomes an easier conversation for sure.
So just a quick question about Bryce McConnell Barker here before we get into this little game I want to play with you here. Sure. On December 30th, Coach Dean told another media outlet, and I quote, "I'd be really surprised if we don't see him Wednesday," unquote. That was 2.5 weeks ago now, and we still haven't seen him. Obviously, he's a massive part of this team. Head injuries aren't something anyone wants to mess around with. I'm a football guy, so I fully can relate to that and understand that. But is there any sort of update that you can provide with regards to our captain?
Yeah, I think he's definitely very close. He's been practicing the last couple of weeks. I think in a lot of cases, I think if you wanted to I'm not saying you. I don't think you'd ever rush an injury back, but I think there's a case to be made that he was probably close enough that we could have. We're trying to be very careful with it because I think we have our eyes set on a really long second half here, and we don't want to just kind of rush somebody back that's just close enough. We want it to be 110% in that situation. And Bryce has been great. He's been on the road with the team the entire time, and it comes in between periods, chats with the guys. And some players would just sit at home. They didn't want to take the long bus ride down with it or jump on the road. He's real close here. We're hoping to get him back here this weekend, and that he feels 110% ready to go. And I think he's going to be the best, trade deadline ad we're going to make here and of that group. So no, I don't, there was no setback. There was no issues on top of that. I think probably, truth be told, that break probably wasn't the best because it kind of takes you out of your routine. It probably took a little bit longer to get up to speed, get your legs under you, because those 9 days are great to get away from the rink, but at the same time it throws you off your routine, and we've probably just been a little overcautious with it. But no, he's in great spirits now, and he finally looks like himself, so we're excited to get him back on the ice.
That's awesome. All right, so I got 5 different rule changes that I want to throw out at you, and you can answer it with a simple love it or hate it. Okay, but there's reasons behind these. So different leagues have been experimenting with different rules. So one of the ones that was talked about recently is goalies play with 2 blockers, no catchers, and the reason being is there's less whistles, more flow to the game. Love it or hate it?
I hate it. I don't know if it's just road hockey, mini sticks, whatever. Everyone loves a great glove save. Just the way it hits the pocket of that glove. Like I'd like to see less whistles too. I hate watching linesmen drop pucks or kick guys out in that constant circle. But truthfully, no, I would hate if we got rid of that beautiful glove save. No different than baseball. It's one of those that gets the loudest reaction in a building. A great glove, even if you're on the road and your goalie makes a great glove save, everyone appreciates that. So no, hate it.
The professional women's league that just came out, you score shorthanded, the penalty, if your penalty expires, majors excluded. Love it or hate it?
I like that. I think it's always weird when you score a shorthanded goal and then you had, like the other night we scored one, and then you still have to regroup and think, okay, we got another a minute 25 to kill off here. I think that's a true killing of a penalty. I think that would be a cool thing for us to look at too.
Number 3, continuous 3-on-3 in overtime, and you play until someone scores, regular season only.
Yeah, I think the shootouts have kind of lost a little luster, especially in our league. I think the 3-on-3, I don't think anybody would want to see 25 minutes of that, truthfully, because I do think it would end pretty quick. But yeah, I don't mind that. I like that.
Number 4, a 2-minute. So this goes back to the original rule, which was in 1956. So a 2-minute minor lasts the entire 2 minutes, regardless of if a team scores or not. So that was the rule originally, and then I believe it was changed because the Montreal Canadiens had such a dominant power play that they literally changed the rule because of that. But love it or hate it?
I hate it. I think I find sometimes when whether it's a major penalty, if it's not the right call, it can really impact the game. Whereas I think if you score, that's what you want out of that power play. Power play's over, back to 5-on-5. I think truthfully the best parts of any game is 5-on-5. The less time you can have kind of playing 4-on-4, special teams keeps everybody involved a little bit more. And I think when you're talking about kind of developing young players, if you get into a special teams match, it's tough to get everyone their equal share of ice, and you're kind of running the same kind of guys out constantly. So no, I think I like to keep that one the same as we have it right now.
And the last one. Now, before you automatically say you hate it, I wanted to think about this for a second. So this is one. I'm so sick and tired of seeing hockey games kind of being decided because one player is an inch offside or
Right.
Guys doing, a 15-minute review, right?
Yeah.
Eliminating the offside rule.
Yeah, I don't love it because I just think some of the greatest plays in the game now is coming off the rush, making those skilled plays. And I'd hate to just see some team just park someone right at the other end of the rink and just have it constantly sending pucks the 200 feet. Because I think any of the super skilled players, they play fast and they play in small areas so well. And that's what we like. But yeah, I definitely think if you can't see, the iPads come out, and this is not just our level, this is seems like every sport now. I think there should be almost a time spot on it. If you can't see it at that point, then so be it. The calling the whatever was called originally stays, and that way we get back to playing it. Because I think sometimes when we're really slowing things down, it really takes away the actual play. You're not even looking at the play. You got like zoomed in screens that are, such a zoom in of like a toe of a foot. And I think on those things was probably never the initial intention, but we definitely want to get the right call made every time. And it's kind of a fine line to balance. But yeah, I think it can really lose the momentum in a game when those iPads come out, and it could be an overextended kind of review type thing.
Perfect. All right. So before I let you go, I'm going to, if you can give me a 15, 20-second response, I'm just going to list off some players and some people involved with the organization, and then we'll let you go after that. So
Sure.
let's start with one of the players who's, taken one of the biggest steps and impressed me a lot this year, Marco Mignosa.
Yeah, Marco's obviously a super skilled, super smart player coming in the league. I thought he had a fantastic 16-year-old year with us, and he kind of maybe was put in a situation last year where maybe playing too much in terms of what we were expecting out of him. And I know he put a ton of pressure on himself as going in his draft year. What is expectation? You always want to keep growing off of that great 16-year-old year. And I think he's just one of those guys that had maybe a little bit of a sophomore slump. And I think he's going to be an NHL draft pick this year, and well deserved. And it's great when you can kind of stick with a player. They believe they don't lose that faith in their ability, and they stuck with it. That he took everything to heart, which is good and bad last year. And I think he really put the work in this summer and really took a step. So yeah, it's been phenomenal to see. And he's a big part of our success.
Brady Martin.
Yeah, I think everyone's truly probably in this last 6 weeks getting an idea of what Brady actually is as a player. I think he puts a ton of pressure on himself, no different than Marco. And, missing 5 weeks, then going to Hockey Canada for we really didn't have a lot of time to work with him or him get comfortable with the group here, start coming out of the year. And I think when you see him, the physicality brings, the high skill, the smarts, it's just, he's an outstanding player. And I think somebody that, everyone's truly now in the Soo getting an idea of where that kind of, I don't want to say hype came from, but obviously we were such an early pick last year. There was a lot of hype surrounding it. And I think everyone's getting an idea shift by shift now what he brings to the game. And he's already a good player. He's not somebody you have to say, just wait in a year, he's going to be dominant. He's already taken that step. And I think his second half, he's going to be like a dominant player for us.
A little bit outside the box here, but David Branch.
Yeah, David, it's crazy. Just I know they were talking about him in his last year here. He gave me my first job in hockey, kind of coming out of school, and he was like everybody he's touched coming through this league's been outstanding. And just to see every 5 years, you can look back and think of what the league used to be, and it's always light years ahead of everywhere else now. And I think the job he's done, and it's definitely just. Definitely not an easy job, and it's something that you're constantly juggling a lot of balls. But definitely, Dave's done a phenomenal job with this league, and where he's put it, and it's going to be huge shoes to fill for that next person.
R2 Karki.
Yeah, R2's been again somebody that came in an import draft. Was so excited to be here. He's added a dynamic to our back end, and I think anytime you can bring in a world junior player that just comes with that swagger. I think there was a lot of memes and stuff like that, social media, about him kind of standing in his office there on our power play. And, he's so dynamic. You got to be aware of when he's on the ice, and he's just got that great personality fitting with our guys right away. And I'm excited to see him in here in the second half, because when you miss those guys for 5 weeks, it's tough when they get back. But we're excited to get him back running our power play again. Tim
Lukenda.
Tim's been phenomenal with me. He's someone that cares so much about this city and about this team, and he's uber competitive. His father was originally who hired me, and whenever you kind of go through those transitions, it's kind of interesting on that side of it. But I don't think Tim's so out of the limelight with everybody. He likes to let everyone do their job, which is very rare in sports, especially nowadays. But he's always there to support everybody. And I don't think probably a lot of people, if they don't know him, know how much he cares about this community and this team. And it's first and foremost for him that, it's got the reputation that it is. I know he takes a lot of pride in it. And I know he's itching to get to kind of take this team to another step here too. So yeah, but he's been phenomenal since he's jumped on with us full time.
A player that you added this year before the season who's had an unbelievable impact on this team, Jack Beck.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes these trades need a little bit of time to work out, and they get looked at in a different view. I think we go through that a lot of times at the trade deadline. Everyone wants to grade losers, winners, what's wrong with the trade. And even we did that trade early in the year, it was funny. A lot of people were kind of so taken back that we would even try and add Jack Beck at that time of year. And I just thought, knowing the person he is, what the impact he was going to have in our room, I just thought it was really important just to get him around our guys and just bring that swagger back with our group, which I thought we've always had. And just last year we got a little bit away from it. And he's meant a ton. Obviously, he's putting himself in, in the running for a scoring lead, and not just what he brings on the ice, but off the ice too, just what he meshed with the guys. And I think whenever you can get those deals done earlier on, it just, adds so much more to your room. And, we were even, joking the other day, what would Jack Beck have cost the trade deadline in terms of what he brought to the team. But at the same time, he's been a phenomenal addition to the group, and somebody that's, really been an important player for us to put us in this situation.
All right. I got about 4 more here, I think. Owen Allard.
Yeah, Owen's got it. Like, I think anytime you talk to him, he's bouncing off the walls. He brings a ton of energy. It's no different than his game. And he's a real important member of our organization in terms of like just that energy, hop up and down. He's the type of guy that knows his roles in and out, and he takes it to heart, and he's really put a lot of work in. And I know he was discouraged last year, obviously missing time with his injury. And a lot of guys could have just said, oh, well, I guess this is what it is. I'll have an okay year. But like, he came in after his camp with Colorado, and he was hell bent on, I'm going to get an NHL contract this year. I'm going to put myself in that situation. And he's not a guy that, hey, I have to be the guy. I have to play in the half on the power play. He'll play wherever you need him to play. And I know he's a big member of our organization in terms of in that room. He's very important to our group, and just what he brings leadership wise, I don't think people kind of probably see enough of, but he's definitely brings a ton of energy, and he's a fun guy to be around.
Jerry Liscombe Jr., the voice of the Greyhounds.
The legend, Jerry Liscombe. Yeah. Jerry does so much for the organization. He's one of those guys that, he's on the road with the team every weekend. He cares about the group. He cares about the reputation. He's got so much pride for this organization, and every little odd job you could think of in this organization. If Jerry left, there'd be a lot of days where we'd think, how do we get this done? Or how does this work? And Jerry just already has it done for us. And he's, he's tight with everybody in terms of, being on the buses with everybody traveling, and he just meets a ton of this organization. And I know he cares so deeply about it. And, he's put a lot of time and a lot of years in it, and he's the best radio guy in the league. And I think he's somebody that doesn't get enough credit, because he's guilty like the rest of us. We don't puff our chests out. We just go and do our jobs. And Jerry's no different than that. And we're super fortunate to have Jerry.
I probably pronounce his name wrong because I don't know. There's a problem with it. But Soo Greyhound draft pick and U18 captain for World Junior captain for Team USA, Rucker McGrody. I mean, there's been some speculation about, what could happen with him, but just talk about him quickly.
Yeah, obviously he's a phenomenal player. Everyone can't say enough good things about him. When we took him in that regular draft there, it was kind of it was a little bit of a flyer, knowing that he was kind of his father it was a Canadian. He spent a lot of time with, he was kind of tight with a few guys we knew at the time, and always kept in touch. He's always been super respectful, but obviously, going back to Michigan here for the second half, and, we were bugging Gavin Hayes even about getting on him and that type of thing too. But yeah, he's an outstanding player, and it's too bad we couldn't get him to come.
2 more. On that same note, Matthew Virgilio.
Sorry, my cough's kicking in there.
Yeah, no worries. You're good.
Yeah, I think Matthew's like a lot of young D that come in the league. He's somebody that has had a great season with us. He, probably hasn't seen the same power play and different minutes on that side of it, but I think he's really taken a step in his game. And I think when he's playing with the D-core, learning from them every day, I think he's, really taking some strides with us. And I think he's another guy that can take another step here in the second half. But yeah, I've been really happy with Matthew's transition here from a 16 to 17-year-old, because it's a really tough league to play in as a young D.
And finally, Kyle Raftis.
Yeah, it's been a crazy it's been a crazy amount of years here with the Soo, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I always laugh in these types of interviews. It doesn't even feel like I've been there that long, which I assume is a good thing. But yeah, I'm excited to get back to work with here in the second half. Got the GTHL All-Star game here tomorrow night, and then jump back up with the team. But no, I'm really fortunate to be in the situation that I am, and I'm excited for the second half.
Listen, Kyle, I can't thank you enough for doing this. Every time we've reached out to you, you've been more than accommodating, and you take on the tough questions. And again, I said this to you before. The Soo is extremely lucky to have you. You've kind of spoiled us in a sense up here, and we definitely appreciate all the hard work. We appreciate the dedication, and we do. We thank you for the job that you've done and that you continue to do.
No, I appreciate that. And like I said, when we're talking about tough questions, I take it as a sense of pride that we're in this situation to have these tough conversations, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times, even our down years, some teams would take that and say that's a great year and fan bases will be happy with it. And I think that we've pushed the bar that high is a credit to everybody involved, from Jerry to all the coaches that we've had and the players too. So I appreciate the coverage of the team and hope everyone's as excited the second half as I am.
Oh, let's roll. We'll get you back on once you guys make the Mem Cup. That's for sure.
Sounds great.
All
Thank
right,
you.
buddy. Thanks again. Eh? Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Yeah. Talk soon.